thank you for joining us for this last session. I know some of you are departed, so those are here. When you go, you can say it was a fantastic session, that last one. And also just a slight addendum. So everybody who's got a printed programme today, it's missed out the Q&A session at the end of our talk. It is online, so just to make you aware, we will have a Q&A session, so please do have your questions ready on Slido or noted down. So this session, it builds on a series the Forum has hosted since 2021, looking at accessibility in all its forms across the sector. Our first presentation is about Access All Areas and will be presented by Jane Cooper, who's Managing Director of Access and Inclusion UK. Jane will show how information, facilities and customer services make a difference and increase accessibility. Jane?
Good afternoon, Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jane, but most importantly, I want to introduce you to Mehran. And Mehran is my daughter. And she was born with an exceptionally rare chromosome condition that only 60 people in the world have. So it was a real life-changing moment for me. And I realised that actually sometimes it means that there are additional sort of challenges that a lot of people face that I wasn't previously aware of, and that's why I do the work that I do. And I want to start with a little icebreaker. I want to make it a little bit interactive this afternoon. It is the sort of, one of the latter sessions of the day. So what I'd like you to do, if you're all willing and able, please, I'd like you to raise your hands for me. And if you're sort of watching at home, I can see you. So please raise your hands for me as well. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. And I don't want you to do anything yet. Just keep your hands up. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Just keep your hands in the air, and then I'm going to explain what I'd like you to do. So the first question is, are you a family member or friend, someone who is deaf or has a hearing impairment? Question number 2, you can leave your hands up. Question number 2, are you a family member or friend, someone who is blind or partially sighted? Question number 3, keep your hands up. Question number 3, are you a family member or friend, someone who has a mobility impairment? Maybe you have a walking aid, for example, or perhaps are a wheelchair user. Number 4, are you a family member or friend, someone who is autistic? And number 5, are you a family member, someone you know, someone who is living with dementia? If you answered yes to any of those questions, could you put your hand down for me, please? Okay, so if you look round, we've got a very, very few number of people with their hands up. You can all put your hands down for me. Thank you. So the purpose of that is to say that whereas we might think about disabled people as some other group of people over there, a small group of people, it's actually a lot of people. It's a huge number of people. We're going to think about how many people it is just now. So we've got a little quiz that we'd like to do, or I'd like to do, to think about some of the numbers. So if you want to join the quiz, you can do that on Slido, and you can also play along at home. It sounds like a quiz show. Okay, so the first question I'm going to ask, well, it's a statement, it's a true-false quiz. I'm going to say that there are 10 million disabled people in the UK. Do you think that's true or false? 10 million disabled people in the UK, is that true or false? Are you pressing your buttons? Okay, so we've got 65% of you think it's true. And actually, you're wrong. Because it's actually 16 million people. It's 1 in 4 people in the UK. So the next question. I'm going to say that the total spending power of disabled people in the UK is £65 billion a year. Is that true or false? £65 billion a year. Okay, so 62% of you this time think it's true, and you're wrong again. It's actually £265 billion a year. It's a huge market. And then the final question, I'm going to say that wheelchair users make up 7% of the total number of disabled people. Do you think that's true or false? Okay, so this time 57% think it's false, but it's actually true. Yeah, so wheelchair users make up 7% of the total number of disabled people. We sometimes think about it as being a bigger group than that because it's more visible, really important group to consider, but actually it means that 93% have other health conditions or impairments that we need to think about. Oh, who's won? Oh, there we go, Ruth Dancer, whoever you are, congratulations. There's no prize, unfortunately. So just to summarise some of that then, you can see the figures there for yourself. If you include the grey pound, then the figure is 585 billion in terms of spending power. And if you attract that one person, you attract their entire travelling party. So if you know, I will only go where Mehran can get in. So it's not just my spend that you're attracting, it's the whole of my family group. And if you get it right for people, they will become loyal customers who will return again and again. There's also a legal aspect to this. It's not only the right thing to do, it's not only a financially sensible thing to do, there's also an act that goes around this. And it recognises that people haven't always had a fair opportunity to participate in the past. And so there's an act to protect people with 9 protected characteristics, one of which is disability. So it's the right thing to do, it's a financially sensible thing to do, it's the legal thing to do, plus I've got another question for you, so you're keeping you working this afternoon. I want to know why people spend time with horses. So you tell me, and hopefully, fingers crossed, a word cloud will appear with your answers on it. So why do people spend time with horses? What do you get out of it? What's the enjoyment? Do I need to click onto the next slide? Okay, so hopefully by magic, words will appear. Or not. Oh! Oh, there we go. Yeah, okay. You get paid to do it, okay. Fair dues. It's relaxing, it's calming, it's therapeutic. Enjoyment, well-being, sort of sense of pride for work, some people do it. Harmony, companionship, it's magical, it's calming. So lots and lots of reasons why people spend time with horses. You know, and I think that's a really interesting sort of word cloud there. And the fact is that, well, I'll move on from that now, thank you. Disabled people want the same things. Disabled people want that sense of enjoyment, of calming, of companionship. But there are other things as well that are beneficial. There are emotional benefits. It's therapeutic. It creates an emotional bond. There are psychological benefits because it builds confidence, improves motivation. Social benefits because it helps with communication and social skills. And physical benefits of exercise, movement, improving posture, balance, coordination. There are lots of specialist groups within the sort of sector who offer opportunities for disabled people, and there are just a few here. So there are Rainbow Horses, the Pony Club, Riding for the Disabled, and one of the ones I really like was Tea with a Pony, which is for people living with dementia, so to go along and have tea with a pony, which I thought was wonderful. And there's been a shift in thinking about what disables people, which is that in the past it was very much thought about that the issue was the individual, and it was kind of what we know as the medical model of disability. But we recognise now that actually the issue is an inaccessible world, and that's called the social model of disability. And that means that recognising that, we know that if we make changes to the environment, to information facilities and services, that actually we can improve accessibility for people. And that means every organisation can make a difference by making changes to those things, information facilities and services. The route to do that is to understand people and what barriers people might face and what the little solutions are to those barriers. These are real people, these are not Googled images. So Gary is my dad, my lovely dad, and he wears 2 hearing aids, he's very deaf and finds it difficult to walk. Stephanie is blind and she has an assistance dog. Hannah is a wheelchair user. Megan is autistic and Brian is living with dementia. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of what some of the barriers can be for people with those different sort of needs. So if I was to say to you, Okay, what have I said? Any ideas? It's tricky, isn't it? What I said was welcome to the Institution of Mechanical Engineers. But if you've not got the audio, you need something else. So for people who are deaf or have a hearing impairment, good written information and good signage, for example, are very important. I'm going to do another little exercise, and then you can rest. So if you're sitting to this side of the exit, what I'd like you to do when I say go, I'd like you to say the alphabet really loud, okay? All of you at the same time. If you're behind the exit doors, I'd like you to say your name and address over and over again, all at the same time, okay? You ready? Steady, go. Louder. Okay, you can stop now, thank you. Okay, what that's about is, that's quite noisy and chaotic. And for autistic people, one of the aspects of that is that they can be over or under sensitive to sight, sounds, tastes, textures or smells. So a really noisy environment, if they're oversensitive to noise, can be really, really distracting and quite disturbing. But what you can do is actually create a quiet space. Or you can have ear defenders that people might borrow that will make your event, your venue, more accessible for those people. So I'm going to go through just a very few top tips. You can support people who are deaf or have a hearing impairment by the things I said, but also perhaps if you've got a show of some kind, having a microphone or a hearing loop, or BSL sessions, British Sign Language. If for people who are blind or partially sighted, you can have large print information, good visual contrast, and perhaps audio or tactile information. If someone's a wheelchair user, you can provide ramps and lifts, perhaps lowered counters, really good information in advance of a visit to help them prepare and to plan. Things like automatic doors and signposting accessible routes. For someone who is autistic, you can help them to bypass any cues that you might have because they can be very distressing too. You can have a quiet space. You can create a sensory story. For someone living with dementia, you can have neutral mats at your entrance rather than a dark mat, which can appear like a black hole to many people living with dementia, which can be very sort of disconcerting. You can have good lighting and perhaps a memory box to sort of trigger memories and start conversations. An easy way to start thinking about improving your accessibility is to provide really good accessibility information online. Have an accessible website, an accessibility tab that's easy to find, and share useful accessibility information. 93% of disabled people will try to find accessibility information about a place before they visit, and 58% will assume you are inaccessible if they cannot find the information that they need. So your biggest barrier and potentially your biggest opportunity is to provide that good, relevant information. And those stats come from something called Ewan's Guide, which is like the TripAdvisor for disabled people. Here to help you, there's a brand new toolkit, which is the Visit England Accessible and Inclusive Tourism Toolkit for Businesses. Quite a not very pithy title. But it's not just about tourism. There are top tips, there are action checklists, there's technical guidance, there are training slides, a fantastic resource that I would recommend that anyone look at to make a start. And by way of sort of finishing off, I want to say that there's no mystery to all of this. People think it's complex and complicated. Actually, it boils down to one very simple thing, which is providing a warm welcome and demonstrating to every person that we know you, we understand you, and most of all, we value you. And I want to end with this quote from David Block, who's a blind journalist and filmmaker, whose documentary, Gift Horse, I would recommend to you. And he said, "Horses don't judge by appearance. They look past people's disabilities and recognise the emotions inside. Horses are more than friends and companions. They are mirrors of the soul." And with just a few little changes and a little bit of thoughtfulness, you can do things that will mean that anyone who wants to can have that experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. So I told you it's going to be lively, so you're probably nice and awake now. So next I'm going to bring up, for our second presentation, it's Mandana Mehran, who's Head of Participation and Development at British Equestrian. Mandana will talk about the journey BEF has taken, the challenges along the way, the learnings and future plans.
Thank you, Beverley. Thank you, Jane. You set me up really well, actually. You mentioned a couple of points around your biggest barrier could be your biggest opportunity, and I think this is quite important. So good afternoon, Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen. Over the next 10 minutes, I want to talk to you about the journey British Equestrian and our Federation members have taken to create a more inclusive and welcoming environment for people. We have started our journey back in 2022 when we signed the pledge to commit to create a more inclusive environment. We then did research called Horses for All, and then that led into us launching our diversity and inclusion strategy in November 2023. Before I start though, I hope that all of us in this room are in agreement, and those who are listening online, that everyone has the right to shine. As an industry, we have the duty to provide that opportunity for them. The reason that I'm saying this is because in the next slide, I'm going to show you some disheartening quotes that came from the research we've done, and they're not easy to read. They're coming from people from ethnically diverse background and their interaction with equestrian at different settings. Like this one that says, "Wherever we go, they stare at us. We are really noticeable. Sometimes it's okay because I want them to see how good we are, but if you are by yourself, you can feel singled out." The reason for putting these quotes up is if we believe everyone should have the chance to shine, all of us in this room have a role to play to create a more welcoming environment for people, regardless of their background and regardless of who they are. And this might mean different things to different one of us. For some of you in this room, it might mean that you find the courage to stand up and speak out. And for some of the others, it might mean to listen with patience and make people feel heard and valued. As a sport, we're actually quite diverse in a lot of aspects. It was mentioned in the morning, we are very diverse when it comes to gender. We are a beacon of gender equality, where men and women compete at the same level, but we also have, this is going automatically, but we also have 80% of our participants are female, and this is not something that other sporting activities have. They are really struggling to get women and girls involved in physical activity. We are really good when it comes to age. We are really good and we have strong record in relation to disability, both in participation and talent, because of the great work that organizations like RDA do. However, we lack representation of ethnically diverse communities and people from low socioeconomic background. So when we did the research, those two demographics was the main demographic of our research. We knew this is going to pose a challenge on us because we are a predominantly rural sport, and the race representation goes down when you go to the rural landscape. But also we know a lot of our riding school are fighting for supply and demand, and they have a supply and demand issue. So again, it's going to create a challenge for us. But also the other point to mention is we know there's great work being done in urban landscape. Centres we have like Summerfield here today, in London, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, where you see those demographics being engaged really well, but we don't collect data to showcase those. So the first step we've taken in 2022, we did a research called Horses for All. This was to better understand barriers people have from those demographics to engage with our sport. We wanted to know how our sport feels and looks like for people from that background, and that involved people from grassroots all the way to elite level. And we wanted to understand their lived experience within equestrian environment. It led into us having 100-page reports, very long report that helped us to write our strategy at the end. But I want to highlight a couple of areas in here. One of them is around the barriers. So barriers were the main question of the research. And There are some key themes coming out of here around affordability of our sport, exclusivity of our sport, unfortunately some bullying and racial experiences, but also lack of awareness, both in terms of where the opportunities are and where riding schools are. We took some people for an experience day. Some of them were living less than 2 miles away from a riding school, but they didn't know that riding school existed there because it was tucked away from a shop, behind a shopping mall that they go and shop every weekend. But also lack of awareness around pathway opportunities we have. But also, more importantly, some positives came out of it around horses for health and happiness and the latent demand of our sport that I'd like to highlight a little bit now. We have a huge demand. Again, this is not something a lot of other sporting organizations see. We took 150 kids to riding experiences. They've never ever been to a riding school. And they loved their experiences. The feedback was phenomenal. And a lot of them said they would love to come back to that environment. And it was an initiative to do a lap on a horse for £1. And when they walked to those riding schools, most of them were quite shocked because the perception they had of a riding school environment wasn't what they've seen. They thought they were going to walk into a glamorous yard. And this is not the case for the majority of our riding school. And the reason that I'm saying that this is important and we need to change the perception is because most of them then said, I feel I can belong here. So the perception about our sport is completely wrong. And I wanted to read this one that was really cute from one of them said, I got over a fear today. I got on a horse. I know it was only short, but it isn't something I would have done before. And I would definitely come again. And some of them did go back to those riding schools. I'm just going to highlight a couple of points around the key takeaways for us and our federation members. One is around the fact that race and class experiences are common. So unfortunately, the experiences they had in an equestrian environment was not the only time they had those experiences. It happened to them on that day in their supermarket or somewhere else. So unfortunately, these are deeply rooted societal barriers that we are facing with, or people from those backgrounds are faced with. Race and representation and visible diversity matter. They wanted to see people who look like them. So we really need to think about having some role models from those backgrounds for them to look up to, and it is very important to them. And the last one in here around equestrian activity is socially, culturally, and emotionally valuable was very interesting to us and more importantly to the research agency who's done this research, because they said everyone in the research highlighted the benefits of being around horses, even those who had negative experiences. They said when you get to the yard, nothing else matters. And that's why they want to come back to that environment. And they want to create a better environment for people who look like them. They want to create a better pathway for them. So we developed a response document to that comprehensive alongside our federation members, and we committed to write a strategy, and we kept the name Horses for All because it works really well. We said that this plan is going to be an overarching plan. So it's not only going to look at those demographics, it's going to be a plan, a strategy around inclusion as a whole and diversity and sense of belonging. And we launched it last November. Here is the vision, talking about the fact that we like to have an industry that is representative of the society. And you can see there about making sure everyone feels valued and heard, and we reference sense of belonging here. And our mission talks about a culture of everyday inclusion. Please have that at the back of your mind. This is not something that you do as an add-on. It's something you need to live with and have that as a theme in your day. So hopefully, and these are the enablers, that we have about being ambitious, practicing allyship, and also being authentic. And these are 6 strategic objectives. They are, I'm going to bring a couple of them to life before I finish. So One is around leadership and governance. Across the Federation, we are working on building a culture where differences are valued, because we believe diversity is going to drive innovation, sense of belonging and empathy. And we're going to work on data that was mentioned this morning again. It's so important that we gather diversity data of our people, because we need to better understand who our people are. The reason is diversity is not just the color of your skin. There's a lot of elements of diversity that is not visible. So instead of assuming, we need to ask the question, and we need to better understand who our people are that we are communicating with. And the last one is around our training. We will be developing a training and education that is going to be open to everyone. So I like to hope that a lot of people in this room and online are going to go and join those sessions. It's going to come out of our and member bodies channels, and it's about putting inclusion at the heart and centre of everything we do. And the reason for doing this is because we want to have a mutual understanding of what inclusion means for us as a sector and as a society. Before I finish, I like to say I think all of us know the benefits of sport on people's physical and mental well-being, but we all know what that magical animal do and what that means for the added value of our sport. So it's our collective responsibility to make sure everyone can access our offer. So let's promise to be respectful, but be curious and not be afraid of asking questions, because we need to ask questions to know more to be able to improve together. And at the end, I'd like to show a 15-second video, if I have time, that highlights that horse and human bond element.
Horses that keep me calm, keep me relaxed. Like, it's just the way they are. Like, they can be funny, moody, different things. It's just like helping the horses get better at learning stuff, and also relearning stuff while they're doing it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mandana. And like you said there, please be curious. Please do put your questions forward for us at the end of this session, either on Slido or make a note or in the room. Our third presentation is around everyone welcome and about understanding our audience. And this is by Rebecca Cogswell, who's Director of Marketing, Communications and Fundraising at the British Horse Society. Rebecca will make use of recent audience insight conducted by the British Horse Society to provide better understanding about how accessible equestrianism is to a broader audience.
Thanks, Beverley. Good afternoon, Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Beverley, for the introduction, and thank you to everyone that's come before me to setting this up so nicely. It's almost as if we planned it. I want to talk to you today a little bit about audiences, and I mean broad audiences, all of us really, and what it takes for equestrianism to be an industry or a pastime, a hobby, or even just a one-off experience that feels truly welcoming to everyone. But first, we have to understand everyone. We have to understand why it matters. And as you've already heard today, it matters because many, many times this unique bond has made a massive difference to people's lives. It's a bond between people and horses which is like no other. Evidence tells us that time with horses benefits our mental health and general well-being, and in some cases can be truly life-changing. And because continuing to build participation and education, and therefore a workforce, allows us to continue to share these benefits for people and for horses. But how do we ensure that it does feel truly welcoming to everyone, and so that everyone can truly share in those benefits? So as I said, we have to start with everyone to better understand them, to understand our audience through robust insight, removing the subjectivity. But if we ask the questions, we have to accept the answers. As Mandana said, it's not always comfortable. Sometimes those answers are challenging for us as a group of people. And we have to lean into that and accept those answers as the truth of our audience. We've got to remember that those of us in this room make up a really tiny proportion of people who could or might want to engage with horses. Our broad audiences will be different from us, so we need to understand them better to understand how to respond and make them feel welcome. Last year at the British Horse Society, we conducted a really significant piece of audience insights, amongst representative groups of our audience and our potential audiences. So I want to share a little bit of the output of that with you today. I'm not going to share lots of stats, which I'm sure you'll be very pleased to hear, but it is important that we understand that this insight represents 68% of the population. Not all of those people are currently riding, they're not even engaging with horses, but they do fall into a selection criteria, including things like them or their children at some point have engaged with equestrianism or with horses, and that they might have an interest in animal welfare or horse welfare. So there are a group of our audience, 68% of the public, who might be relevant for the BHS. We use large-scale quantitative and qualitative methods, so focus groups and surveys, and after a lot of data modelling by people who are much smarter than me, by a really well-respected insight agency, we're able to divide that audience into 6 key segments. We've just selected 3 of those segments of those who are most likely to be engaged with horses or with the work of the BHS. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about those people today. That's our focus. And these people make about 31% of that 68 that I mentioned. That's over 14 million people. So still very statistically representative and still very reflective of a very large swathes of our audience. So who are these people? So sporty and sociable. They're active, they're busy, they're probably a little more competitive than some other segments. They may well be riding. Our data certainly told us that a high proportion of these people were riding. They're likely to be taking their kids to and from riding lessons and to and from other activities. I suspect many people in this room will fall into this segment. Certainly that was the case of those people working inside the BHS. So it's important to recognise that whilst we are all audiences of the equestrian world, we don't represent all the audiences. Holistically healthy, they're really focused on well-being. For them, it's about the benefits that horses can bring people. They might not be riding at the moment, they might have experience in the past, but they're a very people-focused audience. They understand, they think about the benefit of things like equine-assisted learning. And then empathetic equestrians. So this group made up most of the BHS members fell into this group. I think just under 50% from memory. And they are very focused on the horse and horse welfare. They also are very focused on the community aspects of riding, coming together as a group. Many of them are riders or lapsed riders, but they are really, really, I guess, the softer side of equestrianism, those people that might really love their horse like a member of their family, which I'm sure many people do, but this group even more so. So you might recognise yourself as one of these segments. You might well fall into more than one of them. The thing with segmentation is it's never perfect. So you might cross over into 2 segments, but by understanding these audiences, it helped us better understand what we need to know about them. And as part of this research, we asked people what stopped them being more involved in equestrianism, and also what they saw as the benefits. Essentially, where do audiences face barriers to engage with horses, and what unites them? Now, slightly different to what Mandana shared, these are broad audiences, so these aren't just people in diverse groups which we're focusing on, these are our broad audiences. And different audiences face or perceive different barriers, as we've just heard. But affordability by far is the biggest barrier, 60%. It's not surprising, I guess, with the financial climate as it is at the moment, for people and for riding centres to be struggling in the financial world as it is. But 60% of people state that as their reason that they can't engage. 21% feel that equestrianism isn't for them. It's elitist. It's quite a stark reality, bearing in mind that this is an audience, this 68% of people are those that screened into being most likely to be engaged in equestrianism. It's a stark reality that we can't ignore. And whilst having somewhere close by or having the time to engage will be unsurprising barriers, I'm sure, for most of us in this room. It's obvious that these results are challenging, and there are challenges to those audiences feeling welcome and feeling able to engage with horses. You can see here from some verbatim comments that we received, equestrianism can feel really remote, a long way away from the communities that people live in. Comments like upper class, elitist and narrow, and it's too expensive to get into. So whilst we might not think that we're priced out of equestrianism, and we might not think that equestrianism is elitist, we can't ignore that broad audiences do think that. They don't feel that it's a community they can belong to. They don't feel welcome. However, you can see from some of these comments that people felt differently when they know more and have experienced it for themselves. So there is some good news. The good news is that broad audiences are pretty united when it comes to the benefits of engaging with horses. Well-being and human impact is seen as a huge benefit, almost universally, and I think we've seen examples from Jane and Mandana of that today. I'm sure that most of you can relate to the horse-human bond that engagement with horses brings you, but it's particularly key with these audiences when we started to talk about equine-assisted learning. The social element, the community part, the sense of belonging was something that many people experienced and something we heard over and over again from audiences. And the focus on welfare and care of horses unites most people. So there really are some strong positives that we can focus on when we're thinking about inclusivity. There's clearly work to do to make these benefits more available to all, but now we know this, what can we do about it? How do we operationalise it? It's easy to talk about, or challenging sometimes, but it's hard to operationalise. We need a clear strategy for inclusion. We need to do it through our people, through our centres, and within broader audiences. At the BHS, we're already seeing really great successes with some scale to start to deliver this. We've seen over 1,000 students in this academic year already come through our Changing Lives Through Horses programme, giving access to children and young people who would otherwise not be able to afford or physically access horses, and this continues to grow. It's work we're really proud of. We're supporting our centres to help them be more inclusive and offering more opportunities to those people to visit them. And we're sharing that really important horse-human bond with young people who may never otherwise have experienced it. So why does it matter? Because we know that horse-human bond is like no other. We've heard it over and over again today. We heard stories in the focus groups of reduced anxiety, a sense of belonging and well-being. And we know through this work, the work that we'll hear about from Ellie and George in a minute, that we see it changing people's lives on a daily basis. Last year, James Hick talked to you all about riding schools being at risk and why that mattered. Our audiences have told us the same thing. It matters because of the power of the horse-human bond. This bond is why it's really important that the continued use of horses in society continues and is made more accessible for all. We must keep Britain riding to both benefit both people and horses. We must listen to our audiences to ensure everyone feels welcome to experience it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for that. And finally, we're actually going to bring all this to life. We're going to hear from those on the front line and hear the truths and the challenges and opportunities. I'd like to welcome on stage George and Ellie. We're going to talk through pathways to develop belonging in the equestrian sector. It's a tale of two centres. Come and have a seat. So we've got Georgina Urwin and Eleanor Spelman, who come from two very different equestrian centres. As well as the work through their individual centres, they work together and have created pathways which develop belonging to our sector. So welcome, George and Ellie. So can I first start off by you just giving a brief overview of what your individual centres do? So start yourself, Ellie.
Yep, so I'm chairman of a riding club called Solihull Riding Club based in the West Midlands. We recently celebrated our 80th birthday, so we are first and foremost a riding club, but we also own our own facilities and we run also as a competition centre. So we run unaffiliated and affiliated competitions across pretty much all areas of equestrian sport. Around 3 years ago, we started a diversification programme, opening up our facilities to a broader group of organisations and businesses to make better use of the facilities that we had and to start to build ourselves out as a equestrian hub for the West Midlands region and beyond.
Thank you, Ellie. And George?
So I'm George, I'm from Summerfield Stables. So we are a riding stables in Birmingham. We are a BHS approved centre and we're a Pony Club Link centre. We have about 200 riders who ride weekly. We have 300 rescue and 33 rescue and reschooled ponies, and we have 300 children on the waiting list currently. So I can see there's a lot of problems with accessibility that you've already highlighted. And I think it's just really important that you brought these issues together. What we've done is recently, just over 6 months ago, opened a second site based at Solihull Riding Club so that 6 of our equines could move to that site in order for some of our riders to progress on to allow us to deal with making more spaces for our waiting list.
Lovely, thank you for that. And you've kind of rolled nicely into kind of the next conversation I want to have with you is around collaboration. And we did hear a lot of that mentioned already today about collaboration. Can you explain how this collaboration, how it came about to have this and how it's working so far?
Yeah, so I think, we've talked about it as part of this conversation already today. We recognise the challenges faced in the sector in terms of affordability, in terms of accessibility, and we really believe that for us to continue to be successful as a riding club, we needed to work much more closely in partnership with other organisations in the sector, such as Georgina's riding school, Summerfield. And that really sparked the conversation for us to talk about how can we work together so that Georgina's riding school could make use of our facilities, the opportunities we're able to offer through the variety of different competitions and team training and those kind of things that we could offer. And then how could Georgina equally help us as a riding club to engage with a more diverse group of people who would go on to be members of our club, to strengthen our junior-based teams. So I think we saw a lot of kind of opportunity for us to mutually help together, and I really believe we're stronger together than apart and fragmented.
And how long has this partnership been working so far?
So just over 6 months. We opened last summer, and so we're just getting, we've seen a few of the comments there about how young people find it. Well, many people might find it really hard to enter into a mainstream equestrian environment, and that really was the thing that we noticed a lot of our young people were thriving with us, and then we send them off into employment or we'd send them off to other places and they didn't thrive as well, because I think that step where they feel some of these barriers, maybe they have a disability, maybe they just feel a little bit out of place, they didn't know if it was okay for them to wear their hijab and things like that, they weren't sure. And so we felt that actually with Solihull Riding Club, with their facilities and that professional environment, we were going to just help them to transition into the mainstream equestrian world, because we want them to go out into employment. And with many of you here sort of today, there's employment roles to be filled, and our young people would like to step forward and fill them, but there are barriers on that journey, and I feel we're doing our bit to sort of help those steps.
What are your plans moving forward? So we're 6 months down the line. What are your plans moving forward? And as a backup to that, what may be the challenges and opportunities to those plans? So,
I guess, so from our perspective, from the riding club perspective, I think the past 6 months has been a period of getting things set up and stabilised. It's the first time we've really had horses on site at the riding club. It was quite a big change for us to get used to that, because we've not had horses permanently stabled with us. So, coming in, getting set up, coming into the autumn and the winter, and now we're really starting to talk about what are the kind of things we can now do, the programs we could potentially build, training and education opportunities that we might be able to host, not only for Georgina's students, but also for our members as well, and coming together to create those new opportunities. But George can probably add some more to that.
See, we're already an assessment and training centre at our Summerfield site. So what we really wanted to do was see if, being at a site, for example, that has cross-country facilities, whether we could expand and offer more accessibility, because actually it's quite hard in some areas. if you find like there's a distance, we saw that sort of the time and the distance is some of those barriers for people. And actually maybe having an assessment centre closer to home might mean that a few more people might take, for example, assessments with the British Horse Society. So that's something we'd like to look at now, is what can we offer for our riding school members, but also for Solihull Riding Club members, how we can bring that training close to home. That would be a start, but we're also looking at a programme with British Dressage, and they would like to just do a sort of a step-by-step programme to help young people to compete in their first dressage test. So just building confidence to help people to make those steps into this mainstream environment.
I think for me this is all about pathways. So how do we start to build those pathways, strengthen those pathways, make sure that individuals have those opportunity to go down the variety of different routes that we can offer within the equestrian sector, and by kind of acting as a bit of a hub, we can present those and then work and bring those different opportunities together. So for me, I think pathways is a key part of what we want to build.
Definitely, definitely. And so currently, what would you say are the benefits to this collaboration?
I think the benefits are very much kind of 360 and all round. I think whether you're looking at the benefits to those actively participating in the programme, which I think we've talked about, whether those are kind of some of the less tangible benefits, like some of the talks we've heard about, just about having a more diverse group participating in the sport that is visible. It's just starting to shift the needle in terms of what people expect to see in a kind of centres such as ours. And I think that in and of itself, and the narrative that we're starting to tell about this, some of the images that we're starting to get out there, I think that's really where the real power is we're trying to lead the way in our own little world that we can, and show by example. And I think the more we can do and the more we can get that story out there like we are today, then I hope the more we will see others follow and take inspiration and start their own initiatives to do similar kind of things.
Yeah, most definitely.
I think it's just really important that people can have the opportunity to, for example, to build friendships. So riding club members and our members just, helping out at an event together as volunteering, and just, the opportunity to ask questions, or the opportunity to just know more about other people that they might not have spoken to before. I think all those, there's obvious benefits, but there's also all these little benefits that you just, and for us actually, many of our participants are quite young. It's fabulous for them to see riders who are older competing and staying in that sport, and they're looking and saying, I'm looking, I think this is just, I wish I could sit as well as that. I'm really, really impressed at just seeing people continuing with their sport throughout the whole lifetime. And that's something that we have less of, although we do have volunteers who are older, we don't have so many who are riding. So it's just something for young people to look up to and say, I want to continue this for my whole life.
And those young people, the young ones, they're seeing role models and they're seeing people like them, which we've talked before about the barriers can often be. If you're not seeing people like you, that can be a barrier, just even going up to a centre, and you may not enter because you're not seeing people like you. So it's really good. And for both centres, what has been, let's say, the wider implications? Have you seen anything wider outside of your centres that's been as a, in a positive way as a result of this collaboration?
So certainly I think one thing that I've seen is increasing engagement from what I'd call a cross-sector group. So we're starting to see growing interest from private, commercial organisations, from local government organisations who are very interested in the learning and training and development side of things, from not-profit organisations such as both of our own and charities. So I think you're starting to see this ripple effect that goes really across different segments, and those areas all coming together. And I think there's something really powerful in that. Again, coming back to the collaboration and not being fragmented. I think if we can bring public, private, not-profit sectors together and find shared initiatives, that is really where we will see, I think, the power for things to change. And that starts to go far beyond just the small locality. It starts to stretch, you know, regionally and even beyond that as well. And just one other thing before I hand over, I think one other really interesting dynamic we have, so we're 5 miles from Birmingham city centre. George's Riding School's right in the middle of the city, but we sit on the edge of that rural environment as well. It makes it really interesting for us because we are now pulling, through the partnership with George, from an urban group of participants as well as the rural group as well, and we're seeing that mix come together. And I think that also is quite interesting, and in and of itself kind of presents some opportunities for how we can broaden in great engagement beyond maybe our traditional heartland of the kind of the rural side of the sport. Yeah. So George, I don't know, anything for you?
I'd say sort of bringing that together, the confidence and change I've seen in our young people, just feeling that they, because at first I'm sort of saying, oh, just go ahead of me to here, and they just wait for you the whole time, just feeling a little bit confident to be able to engage with people who are, you know, they're a little bit apprehensive, that, oh, they've got a very, very nice dressage horse, I'm a bit scared to talk to them. You need to go and ask where to get something from, or you need to have that conversation. And I'm finding that, you know, they are developing in their confidence, and these sort of things, I think it could have a much further effect, in the future, just as they build through. But the other thing I was going to say about collaborations is things like many of our young people have previously, they've not had a nearby equine course to go to. They've done animal management. We're looking at maybe, is it possible to bring equine courses onto the Solihull site? Because actually, it's a brilliant, the location is fantastic, the facilities are fantastic, and it just opens up a huge world of possibilities that I don't think we've even got to the point of even thinking about what the possibilities could be. It's having the time to actually enact them, and we'll just watch as this unfolds.
I think it's a great demonstration of engagement, but exposure to, say, different socioeconomic groups, the urban versus the rural. So it's, you know, it's a great opportunity for this collaboration. So just a final question for you both. So let's say we've got some people either here in the audience or at home who've got their own centres or clubs and thinking, oh, we might try that. What would you recommend as let's say, the reason behind it, particularly if we are looking at inclusion and perhaps looking at some of those who are not normally, you know, in the equestrian environment?
Yeah, so I think for me, this is about the future of our sport and how do we ensure long-term success and sustainability in terms of what we offer. And it comes back to that being around us being, you know, stronger together. I think what has really, you know, the essence of what's made this work and got us to this point, and what will come, as Georgina said, is very exciting, but it's an open-mindedness, a willingness to try, to give it a go, to find solutions rather than all of the reasons why not to do it, why it's hard, why we shouldn't change. So for me, that it all started with that mindset of an openness, a willingness to change, to give it a go, because we believe that we're stronger together and that the future of the sport has to be one which is more diverse and more open and more inclusive of the communities that we have around us.
I was going to say, there's so many reasons to not do this and so many barriers. If you looked at that, you'd never do it. But I just think we cannot not do these things if we do not make a change to support urban riding centres. And these are the young people who are going into the sport. We're also pricing out our future workforce, our whole future. We cannot not take these steps. And so I do have a million reasons why it's very difficult, and there's huge barriers that we have to overcome. But it has to be done. And I just, that's the only reason. It has to be done.
And I think I applaud you both, because despite the barriers, you know, you've been curious, you know, you've taken those steps, and you're not letting those barriers stop you. You want to, you know, carry on, and that's the best thing to do. And with any business or an operation, you grow through failure, through retrying, through trying something else, you know, and it grows organically. So no, very much applaud you both. So listen, thank you very much, okay, for taking part in this brief conversation. And what I'd like to do now is to invite our three speakers up onto the stage as well, and we're going to open up for Q&A to anybody in the audience and at home. And I have got some questions from Slido, but I'll first see if we've got any questions in the auditorium. Hand down here.
Sorry, I've forgotten your name. It's Siobhan Dillon from the Institute of Applied Equine Podiatry. I was looking at the BHS survey, and it was very interesting, those three categories that are already highly engaged with the equestrian world, or with horses anyway. I was wondering, what were the types and what were you seeing in those that weren't particularly engaged with the horses? Because I just wondered whether it's just because horses don't offer that kind of characteristic, and so maybe they're just a sort of people, maybe they'll do motor racing or they'll do something and that's their interest. So I was wondering, what were the characteristics of people that thought horses really weren't for them, even if you excluded the affordabilities and all of that kind of stuff?
I mean, many. There's 140 pages of stats that I could share, but I won't. The three other categories really were much less likely to be engaged with horses. Didn't mean that they weren't at all. Also, so much more passive maybe in their involvement. So they might support charities, but in a very passive way. They might be. There was another group called family facilitators, and the truth was their lives were just too busy facilitating busy young families to be involved. Some others were much more urban, so where we saw a much higher rate of urban audiences in a segment, they're even less likely to be involved in equestrianism. What I should say is things like elitism came up higher in those groups where they were further away from equestrianism, and affordability was the same. So the barriers in those less engaged groups become even higher. So the numbers that I shared were those groups which were more likely to be engaged, that were closer to our core audiences. So those challenges become greater as you move further away.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because those three titles seem to be personality types, and I wondered what the personality types were that weren't so engaged.
Less personality types, more lifestyle, and it's at different stages of their lifestyle, so it would be demographics as well. It is obviously based on personality to an extent. Some people are very much more competitive, more likely to do much more active sports. Some people are much more passive and observers. So there are likely values and behaviours, I would say, rather than personalities.
Okay, thank you. Now, unfortunately, time has run away with us, and we've got some questions on Slido, but we'll ensure that they will get answered. So I'd like you to just give a round of applause to our speakers and our panel here today. Thank you very much.